Here's an economic play. There's an economic play behind police brutality. There's a huge economic play. So every year, cities across the United States of America, small and large, they spend millions of dollars in police brutality claims. Because it's like, this isn't common. This isn't new, right? Like it happens all the time.
They know it's going to happen.
Right. Even if it's not to this extent where somebody gets killed, somebody might get a black eye, somebody might break somebody's ribs. Like
somebody might be wrongfully accused.
Yeah, it's a lot of police, but that's an issue too, but specifically police brutality.
Right.
So police brutality cases, there's millions of police brutality cases all over the country every single year. Most of the time it's settled with some compensation being paid. And that can go from $1,000 to $100 million, like anywhere in between, right? It depends. So now what people don't fully understand, I think, is that there's billions of dollars that are paid to victims of police brutality every single year.
We hear it all the time.
Yeah.
There was a settlement for $40 million. This person got $25 million. Nobody thinks about. They just hear the number. Nobody thinks about anything else. Where's this coming from?
Yeah, and the crazy. So Chicago, in 2018, $113 million was paid to police brutality.
Settlements and judgments.
113 million in just the city of Chicago in 2018.
1 year.
That's amazing. So it's like, where does this money come from? So this is now you start to peel back the layers, because if it's like a movie, like you see the Instagram clips and it's like, okay, so now I feel like I'm actually a detective, right? Because it's like now you got to peel back the layers.
It's weird because at times, like when you hear these settlements, I remember when Amadou Diallo got the settlement, it was like, yo, it was $40 million or something of that sort, and it was like, that felt like a victory. It felt like, all right, well, he's been compensated for the abuse that he suffered. And then when you look at, like, wait, where did that money come from? It's like, wait, is this really a victory? Should we be celebrating that?
That's the crazy thing about it. Nobody ever thought about where the money comes from. So where does the money come from? The money comes from taxpayers, right? So taxpayers. So that's another thing about police officers. Police officers are public servants, right? We pay, when I say we, tax-paying people of the United States of America pay the salaries and the retirement of the police department. All of that comes from tax dollars. So now the taxpayers are paying for these payouts.
Right.
That's the first part that people need to fully understand. It's like,
even before the payout, right? They have no, you got to understand that part. Before you even get to the settlement, you've had to go through a court case, right? There is no financial responsibility on the side of an officer during a police brutality case. So literally, the taxpayers pay for their trial. So they're paying for the lawyers, they're paying for the judgments, and they're paying for the settlements. Like, there is nothing that they have to do if the act is committed while they're on the job.
Yeah, that's a fact. So now the taxpayers pay for it. So it's like, all right. So now we got to peel back even more layers. So now a lot of cities and towns, they have liability policies. So liability, it's like insurance pretty much, right? So it's like, okay, any other insurance policy, you pay a premium. So like, let's say you have a $10 million liability policy. So your premium for that might be $250,000, right? So taxpayers are paying the premium because that's where it comes from, the budget. So taxpayers paying $250,000, and then the liability company is paying the $10 million. So that's like, okay, if you get into a situation and you beat up somebody, a cop, if you're a cop and you beat up somebody, they sue. Now they win. So now the liability company is liable for that, to pay that.
Right.
So they pay it, but ultimately the taxpayers still paid it in some sort because they actually paid the premium for the policy.
Right.
So, but that wouldn't be that bad.
I was about
because
to say, let's go deeper.
It's like, all right, you're only paying. It's still bad.
Yeah.
Because it's like you are committing a crime. You are actually abusing somebody, and even if it's $1 or 10% of what's being paid, it's still we're still paying for it, taxpayer. So but it's like, all right, it's still less. It's not like you're paying the whole thing, right? But now you got to peel back even one more layer. So it's like, all right, what happens is that most of these cities, towns, and especially as more and more police brutality cases start to be reported, they don't have enough liability, because you got to think about it, liability companies are a business as well. They're not just trying
to give away your money.
Yeah, it's like they cap it. So now it's like there's not enough liability insurance to cover a lot of this, right?
So we need more money.
So now they need more money, additional money in addition to the liability. So where does that come from? So now they have to issue bonds. They have to have bonds, right? So it's like Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, small town in Pennsylvania.
Let's talk about
2004, they settled a wrongful death lawsuit for $7.89 million. So 500,000 came from the insurance.
Right.
7.39 million came from bonds. So the vast majority of it actually came from bonds.
Right. So bonds, in a sense, is like, listen, we're going to pay you back this money over a given amount of time with interest. Right. So a lot of times it could be 30 years. Sometimes it could be shorter. So we just got to understand that part too. So literally a municipality is saying, listen, we don't have the money, but we'll get it back to you. They're going to raise that money from the good people who live in that city. So it's like, listen, the people who live in these areas, and a lot of times it's over-policed areas. So when we look at the cities, it's over-policed areas. When they're over-policed, there's going to be more incidents. There's going to be more altercations with law officials. So they already know, like, all right, well, we're going to set this budget aside, and if we don't have enough, we're going to get more from the taxpayers.
Yeah. And so what's going on now is that cities across the United States of America are going into massive debt because of what they're calling it police brutality bonds. That's what they're pretty much. They're
literally, if you Google it, that's what it says.
Police brutality bonds. So that's the crazy thing about the financial industry. They issue bonds for anything. There was bonds for mortgage-backed security for your home.
Yeah.
There's bonds for anything. If you really get creative, you can issue a bond. So now they actually have police brutality bonds, right? So between 2008 and 2017, we did some research. LA, $74 million and was paid in police brutality bonds.
Yep.
The insurance, the interest on that was $18 million to the holders of the bond, and taxpayers, it cost them $89 million.
Right.
So I just want people to understand that. So, all right, LA didn't have enough to pay police brutality cases.
Right. So those are the judgments and settlements.
Right. So over and above what they already have in their budget, or over and above the liability insurance.
That's the scary part too. Like, we already are saying, listen, we have a budget for it. Let's keep going.
Yeah. So now they have to go to the financial markets and issue bonds worth $71 million, right? So they take out bonds for $71 million to pay this. Because if you know what a bond is, it's like somebody's loaning you money. For them loaning you money, you're paying it back over a course of time, but it's with interest. So now the people that loaned them the money, people that loaned them $71 million, they got paid an interest of $18 million.
We're going to talk about who they are too in a sec.
They made money. They made 18. The people that issued the bonds made $18 million on the bonds. The taxpayers ended up paying for the whole thing because you have to pay for the bond and the interest. Right. So the taxpayers ended up paying $89 million.
Right. So you got the bond money, which is the 71 if we're talking about LA, and then you talk about the interest paid, so you combine those two, and that's what the bill is for the taxpayer.
Yep. Milwaukee during that same time, $26 million in bonds, $3.7 million in interest. The taxpayers paid $29 million. Chicago, I don't know what's going on in Chicago.
Well, Chicago had a lot of high profile cases. One that comes to mind, and we're going to talk about a duration of time. So from like 2010 to 2018, we're talking almost $1 billion paid. They had the Laquan McDonald case where the young black kid was shot 16 times, and I believe the officer's name was Van Dyke or something like that. Got sentenced to 6 years. There was a settlement in that case. So you got a couple of cases in Chicago that happened. From 2010 to 2017, they had $709 million in bonds. $709 million. The interest paid on those bonds was $1 billion with a B. So the taxpayers get the bill for 1.7. There's a crazy part. There was this quote. I was like, yo, that is it. I was reading. It was like, they said this is like the equivalent of paying your rent with a credit card. Like, it's a temporary solution, but the root of the problem is you don't have enough money to pay your bills.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
think about that.
And that's crazy. I mean, because if you look at it, like Milwaukee paid $3 million interest on a $26 million bond. LA paid $18 million on a $71 million bond. They're small. The interest is smaller than the amount of money that they borrow. Chicago actually paid more interest than what they. So not only are they issuing bonds, they're issuing high interest, like credit card, like 35% or something like that. It must be crazy that they paid $1 billion of interest and they only borrowed $709 million. And the taxpayers paid for all of that. Taxpayers paid for $1.7 billion. So this is something that's so crazy because it's like you're paying for police brutality. Right. You are. Yeah. And this is something, like I said, whether you are black, white, whether you are affluent, whatever, this is something that everybody should be concerned about because from an economic standpoint, why do you want to pay for road cops? Why do you want to pay for that?
You're paying for misconduct.
You're not only paying for it, but you're paying for the interest as well. Yeah. So, all right. So now that's the third layer, but here's where it gets really spicy. It's like, all right, so we talking about bonds and they. So who's they, right?
Let's get to they.
So it turns out that large banks, investment firms, Wall Street investment firms, small regional banks, all play a part in issuing these bonds. Some well-known companies that have played a part: Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America,
Bank of Montreal.
So they issue police brutality bonds to towns, cities, municipalities. The cities pay them over the course of time to loan them money so they can pay victims, and they actually are making money. So these companies are making money off of police brutality, right? Because they're getting paid interest on the bonds,
and there's a lot of fees that go into doing these bonds, right? So like we said, there's underwriter fees that the banks are going to collect the money on that every time they issue them. So they're going to, every time that there's a case that is a settlement, there's underwriting fees, the bank gets paid.
So not only do you have the first layer that's making money is insurance companies for the liability claims, because insurance companies always make money. There's no way around it. Like that's how insurance companies operate, right? So now you're paying insurance premiums. So there's insurance policies in place for police brutality. They make money. But even bigger than that, now you have financial institutions that are making money off police brutality bonds, off the interest. Right. So, okay. Now we have to look at, now it makes more sense why nothing has changed in the last 50 years. If anything, it's gotten worse, right? Because there's no incentive for it to stop. Not only do the police do not pay themselves, they have no financial responsibility for it at all. So that's one thing.
Like that's crazy.
The insurance companies is actually making money on it, and now banks and financial institutions are making money on it. So if nobody's losing money as far as the cops, and people are making millions and billions of dollars, right, why would there ever be a real incentive to stop, to change police brutality?
And then all that, right? If this was chess, right? If we said that those are all the players, we got to figure out where are we at on that chessboard.
Just pawns getting moved around. That's the reality of it, and most people don't realize it. So it's like, all right, okay. So, and there's different ways how cities use it. Like some cities use bonds as like part of their budget. Some cities use it as an emergency option. Some cities use it after the liability insurance cuts in, but they're still getting used, right? Yeah.